Hi everyone, Terrible Dactyl here, and welcome to another Jurassic Plastic Retrospective, the series where we look at one particular species as it evolved in one particular brand or line. Today we're going to be taking a look at all the different versions of Velociraptor that have been made by Safari Ltd. starting in 1993. And right here I've got the 1993 version of Velociraptor. You probably recognize this one. Even though this is the first Safari Velociraptor that was ever produced, it stuck around for a good long time. This was in production from its debut in 1993 up probably through the early 2000s, maybe up even to 2007 or so. And it's got a really classic color scheme. It's got these orange tiger stripes on it. And I think this was probably influenced by the description in the novel Jurassic Park. 1993 obviously was the year of Jurassic Park, the movie, coming out, and Safari wanted to jump on that bandwagon. They wanted to make sure that they had the star of the movie in toy form ready to go. And right away, one thing you notice with this Velociraptor is that it's a lot more scientifically accurate than the ones featured in the movie Jurassic Park. It is much closer to the skeleton of the actual animal. Obviously, it still doesn't have feathers or anything like that. Being 1993, that was still a somewhat controversial idea. But the sculpt on this is really, really nice. This is a 1/6 scale model. It was sculpted by none other than Greg Wenzel, who also sculpted a lot of the Batat Boston Museum models, and was a well-known paleo artist in his own right. And you can really see his signature style in this model. It's very lean, it's very agile looking. It's got these little gray bumpy things along the back, crests and little knobby things around the head, which is very reminiscent of his overall style. The only thing that's necessarily inaccurate about this model, other than the feathers, is possibly the bend in the tail. Apparently the original sculpt for this had a straighter tail, but it had to be bent before production in order to fit in the box that they had designed for it. But other than that, feathers aside, it's really kind of ahead of its time for a Velociraptor. You can see that the hands are not pronated. The finger proportions are more or less correct. All the skeletal proportions are really pretty good. It's got that long, narrow snout that's characteristic of Velociraptor and very, very different from the ones in the Jurassic Park movie. So I remember when this one came out in 1993 thinking that this was pretty much a definitive Velociraptor for that time period. And it's still one of my favorite Safari models of all time. This is my original one that I bought back in the 90s, and you can see it's a little bit scuffed up. It doesn't really stand anymore because the feet are a little warped, but that's just from being in a box with a bunch of other models for a long time. And it still holds up. One of these days I want to go back and get a fresh version with the original display box, which just by itself was a really gorgeous packaging. You can see that on my website, carnegiecollection.blogspot.com. This sometimes gets confused with the Carnegie models. You'll see this on eBay a lot, mentioned as a Carnegie Collection Velociraptor, but really, this was one of the first non-Carnegie dinosaurs that Safari made. And sometimes it also gets lumped in with the Dinosaurs of China series, although it was really its own separate thing. It was just marketed as a Safari limited edition. Once again, it was in production from about 1993 to around 2006. I don't know if that's really necessarily limited edition. These are quite common today, especially out of the box. You can find them all over the place for really decent prices. But one thing that you cannot find, and I would really love to find, is the original display stand that they made for this. If you look at some of the original 1993 Safari catalogs, there is a listing just in that year for a really beautiful, like plastic or lucite kind of very simple, very elegant looking display stand that if you did take it out of its nice little box, you could display it on. And I really hope to one day be able to get that because it looks really cool. So that is the 1993 version. And while on the topic, it did also inspire a couple of mini Velociraptors. These are two different versions of the Safari Authentics Velociraptor, and they're also sculpted by Greg Wenzel, who did the second wave of the Safari Authentics dinosaurs. You can see that they're pretty much the same color pattern as their big sister here. There were a lot of different paint variants, and there's even more than this. I think this sculpt is probably even still on the market. You can find this in tubes and things like that today in various different colors. But I really like this one in particular, which is fully painted. It's got this nice glossy paint on it. This one's a little simpler, but a little bolder orange. Just a couple little variants on the minis. I'm not going to include all the mini Velociraptors in this retrospective, just the main larger models. But I thought since I did have these, I would throw them out there as the next evolution. These minis, by the way, also came out around the same time in 1993 or 1994 as the big one. The next Velociraptor that Safari produced was for the Carnegie Collection, and that is this orange and red one right here, which is probably my favorite color scheme of the different Safari Velociraptors. Still featherless. This came out in 2002, and by then it was a little behind its time. You know, by then we were thinking Sinornithosaurus had been discovered, Sinosauropteryx had been discovered, Caudipteryx, even Microraptor at that point had been discovered, so a featherless Velociraptor was already out of date by the time it was released. But just as a model, I think there's a lot to appreciate about this one. I really like especially little details like the black tongue and the gold eye and the red face. These black stripes on the back. It's almost very demonic looking. And the Carnegie Velociraptor did get a repaint in 2007, which we'll see soon. But before that happened, they actually repainted the venerable old 1993 Velociraptor. So just for comparison's sake, here they both are. It is more or less the same sculpt. In about 2006 or 2007, they took the old tiger stripe mold and they repainted it. At about the same time, they repainted a lot of the Carnegie collections into a much, more boring, I would say. I guess more naturalistic, but also just duller brown on brown color scheme. You can see mold fatigue was starting to become a problem. At this point it was a really old mold, and just take a look at the hands here. There's something really wonky. It's got like a double claw. They must have redone this mold several times by the time this one came out. Just compare those hands and you can see that they're definitely losing definition, even in the tail. You're losing detail, you're losing definition. It's getting a little softer, and it still seems to be made of the same material, surprisingly enough. So that color pattern carried over to the repainted Carnegie Velociraptor, which I have right here. And this debuted in 2007, and it is pretty much the exact same color. Look at that. Brown on brown, brown stripes, orange eye, white teeth, dark gray claws, gray underside. It is an identical color. And these were both in production at the same time. They overlapped for a little while. But as far as I can tell, this Velociraptor, the larger one, which was part of the Dino Discoveries line, kind of a short-lived line in 2006 and 2007, as far as I can tell from Carnegie Collector Guides and Safari Collector Guides, it did not stick around in production much longer after 2007. So by 2008 or 2009, the big one was out of production and it had been replaced, fully replaced, by the small Carnegie one, which had the exact same paint scheme. And once again, this is simply a repaint of the original red and orange Carnegie Velociraptor. Now, also around 2007 or 2008, we got this well-known Safari Velociraptor, which was really the first one in the Wild Safari line. And compared to the Carnegie one, and especially compared to the older 1993 sculpt, it's a lot more Jurassic Park-like. You can see they were really trying to go for a more Jurassic Park-ish vibe. Even though the proportions are okay, the head is very, very similar on these two. Just a difference of sculpting. But you can see in pose and attitude, this one just reminds me more of the Jurassic Park raptors, and it even has, for the first time in a Safari Velociraptor, pronated wrists. Look at that. They went back and pronated those wrists in 2007. The sculpt was from 2007. It was released 2007 or 2008. And only now do we get our first pronated hand in a Safari Velociraptor. Even the Carnegies did not have pronated hands. Even the 1993 version and even the minis did not have pronated hands. This one does. So they're obviously going for a more Jurassic Park style. Even so, I really like this sculpt. I think it's just really cool. But I wonder if they were trying to like compete with Papo or something by that point and doing a little bit more Jurassic Park-ish sculpts. That was short, well, I was about to say that was short-lived. This one is still in production, as far as I know. I'll have to go double check. But I believe as of right now in 2019, they're still making this model. That was followed, of course, by the redone Carnegie Collection Feathered Velociraptor, which was the first feathered Velociraptor that Safari produced. And you can see it's similar in terms of sculpt to the older versions, obviously just with the addition of feathers. This came out in 2015. It was the very, very last Carnegie Collection model, and you can see it's fairly up to date. It's even got those two long feathers on its tail, just like some specimens of Microraptor were known to have by that point. It's got a really nice color scheme, and overall, one of my favorite Velociraptor models. Now, being one of the final Carnegies, this was, of course, short-lived, and Safari would not want to go without having a Velociraptor on the market. So relatively quickly after that, we got our 2017 feathered Velociraptor from Wild Safari, which is very well known. It's a newer model, and I think we all know that this is an absolutely gorgeous Velociraptor, probably in terms of accuracy the best Velociraptor that has ever been produced, even though there's something to be said for the Carnegie in terms of how just cool and elegant and streamlined it looks. I think this one is, bar none, the definitive feathered Velociraptor for right now. It does not have a Microraptor-like tail. The tail feathers go all the way to the base of the tail, just like in Zhenwanlong. The sculpting on the feet is a lot more detailed. The wings are still a little small, probably too small, but way bigger and more accurately connected to the hands than in the Carnegie. And overall, I think just the presentation of this one, the pose, the paint detailing, the nice dark wash they have on the feathers, this is the best one yet, and I hope that Safari continues to improve upon their Velociraptors in the future. So this has been our retrospective of the Safari Velociraptor, starting from the oldest in 1993 to the newest from 2017. And if you enjoyed this retrospective, if you would like to see more videos, reviews, and looks back at Safari old and new, as well as other dinosaur toy lines, please like and subscribe to Jurassic Plastic. And thanks again. I'll see you next time.